Most of you, I think, in this room know me, and I think y'all probably looking around the room know a lot of each other. But what we tried to do this morning is we've got a mix of stakeholders in Georgia's future. We've got some elected officials, most of whom will be up here today. We're going to hear from the governor, the speaker. We have our Senate Rules Chairman, Senator Mullis. We've got our Budget Chairman, Mr. England. We have Senator Cowsett here with us, and Stacey Evans. Trying to figure out where everyone, you're not where you were standing a moment ago. You know, we've got members of the media, and although I think a lot of you instinctively took your seats in the back of the room, we specifically did not ribbon you off and try to keep you away from everyone, because one of the things at PolicyBEST, one of our goals, frankly, is to try to bridge the gap between the folks that hang out in certain parts of the Capitol and folks that work in others. The media is, frankly, a partner with us in helping do what we're doing, which is the mission of PolicyBEST. What we've decided to do with PolicyBEST is we're a public policy organization, first and foremost. If you want to use the word think tank, that's fine. That is ultimately what we are building the organization out to be. And what I became concerned of, those of you that know my background, I kind of started this portion of my life in Georgia politics as a blogger. I was a guy that got to write opinions, had a lot of them about a lot of things, frankly about everything, often too many things. But what I found in the blogging world is that we could have opinions, but we were not necessarily being constructive. We were really chasing the thought and the emotion of the day. And when after years of observing this, politics at this state, and the state meaning the state of politics, but very much here in Georgia, we run things on emotional issues that ultimately do not hit us where we live and do not make the state a better place. We have wedge issues that generally decide primaries on both sides of the aisle, and that is what ultimately most of your citizens that have no idea who any of us in this room are, what we do with politics in a campaign doesn't affect them where they live. Our goal, frankly, is to change that. We have to change the debate back to bring the citizens of Georgia back interested into the common, everyday things that affect their lives where they live. So we formed PolicyBEST around, frankly, it's an acronym. Business. Generally, we like the fact that Georgia is branded as a pro-business state, depending on which magazine you're reading or which website, CNBC, what I wake up to most mornings. Number one place to do business. We are a competitive state, we're a growing state. We're the 4th fastest growing state in the country, and right now we're the 8th largest. In 25 years, if growth rates stay the same between us and the other states that are larger than us, we'll be the 5th largest state in the country, larger than the state of Illinois. In 25 years, we'll be adding 4 to 5 million Georgians to the crowded people we already have here. We frankly need better schools, we need better roads, and we need a healthcare infrastructure, as well as, frankly, we need to continue to incubate the science-based jobs in our state so that the people that move here will be people that, frankly, pay their own way. That's the goals of PolicyBEST. We want to focus on those issues. During campaigns, there will be all kinds of other, what I call shiny object politics issues that seek to divide Georgians for the purpose of wedging people between a primary campaign. We're not touching those. We want hard things, hard math, things that we can quantify to move Georgia forward. Under business, the key areas we're going to focus on, as I said, we want better schools. We spend a lot of money on schools. We need to focus, frankly, on getting a return on educational investment out of those. Science, technology, and medicine. We have huge problems in our healthcare backbone, especially the further you get away from where we're sitting right now in the state. Rural healthcare in Georgia is in crisis, and suburban healthcare in Georgia is coming there too, as well as urban. Transportation, we're going to talk for the next few minutes about how PolicyBEST approaches things using transportation as the model. We started officially as an organization right at 2 years ago. Trying to figure out how to get additional funds into transportation was one of our key goals. The legislature passed and the governor signed into law House Bill 170 last year, adding almost $1 billion a year, and it'll increase a little bit over the next few years for new money into transportation. We're going to talk about how that happened and how we look at it. So let's start with the budget. And when the naysayers say we didn't need to put new money into transportation, the first thing they always told us was, we've got $1 billion surplus. Let's take it out of that. Anyone that has ever had a conversation with Chairman England knows that is not the case. While we technically don't have entitlements in the state of Georgia, we do have things that the cost goes up year after year, and there's nothing we can do about it without making an actual cut. We grew about 100,000 people last year. We've been doing that since the bottom of the recession for the last 4 or 5 years. Those people come in, they put their kids in schools. The state sends to each local board of education a certain amount of money for each of those kids. So as those people move in, that grows. University System of Georgia, during the recession, we had a huge spike up of folks going back into schools, both at the university level and our College of Career Academy technical school program. That goes up. Those students have to be funded. The retirement system lost value during the Great Recession. We are now making an annual contribution to get us back to where that's actuarially sound. State employee health care. We all know that the cost of health care is going up. The state is the largest employer in the state. We have to pay for health care for those employees. Those costs go directly to the bottom line. And then, of course, the cost of Medicaid itself, one of the largest parts of our budget, it goes up every year. So between the population growing and health care inflation, after that $1 billion came in, last year we were right at about $300 million in new money coming in. So we have $300 million to solve all the state's problems. What are those? In education, if you're just looking at the QBE austerity cuts, and again, this is how we looked at it last year, the governor added approximately $700 million to the education budget last year, and we're still $460 million from finally ending all of the QBE austerity cuts. Medicaid, frankly, even with a lot of the experts here, got a lot of my good friends here on the front row that deal with this every day, we're still trying to even quantify what the right number to get Medicaid parity, where we are not using the private sector healthcare system to subsidize the public cost of indigent care for uninsured and for Medicaid patients. But Medicaid alone, we just put a plug number, frankly, of $1 billion. Transportation, depending on which version of the consulting studies that came out during 170, just to do the minimal maintenance required, which is what we ultimately tackled last year, plus some congestion relief through the state, $2 to $2.6 billion, and we had estimates as much as $5 billion a year, every year for 20 years if we wanted to get Georgia caught up. Frankly, that's just not going to happen. But one of the lines that I like to use, just kind of rounding all that off, is we have $5 billion worth of problems just on the big ticket items, and we have $300 million to solve them any way we want. So when you then start trying to get into the politics of what's going on, because let's be honest, we could sit up here in an ivory tower and talk about perfect politics, rather perfect policy all day long. Policy does not happen in a vacuum. We have to live in the political reality that we are. And right now that is with, frankly, the majority party that has certain expectations, and one of them is that we're going to cut taxes and cut spending. But when you look at those needs of where we are, the first thing we talk about is, okay, if we're going to cut, where are we going to cut? One of the first things I always hear is, let's cut public assistance. Well, as you can see, public assistance is mostly a function of the federal budget. It's, I believe, 0.1% of Georgia's budget. You could cut it off. It's literally a rounding error. The people that think we're spending too much on Medicaid, it goes up year over year. If you notice what we're spending relative to other states, we're underfunding Medicaid as a percent of our budget relative to other states. Where that becomes important is the federal government pays for 2/3 of that bill. So every dollar we don't put in is $3 that don't go into our hospitals and into our doctors here that make the backbone of our system. Transportation, we are the 4th fastest growing state in the country. We were spending literally last in highway spending. If you look at North Carolina, which is a state that is almost exactly our size, they're the 5th fastest growing state. Demographically, they look a lot like us. The difference is we have a bunch of people living in Atlanta. They have Charlotte and a dispersed population. They are spending twice what we are spending on transportation. Fun fact behind that, North Carolina only spends 4% of that money on debt service. We have been borrowing our way into this problem for so long that we spend 20% of our transportation money on debt service. So we're not even getting a dollar for dollar parity of that half that we're spending for new projects. This is how we started the problem. Clearly we're underfunding transportation, and in going through this we figured out we kind of have the same problem with Medicaid, which is something we'll be looking at this year. Then we're told we're taxed enough already. That's a great bumper sticker slogan, but if you're figuring out if you're really taxed enough already, and I'm not in any way advocating that we are just going out and raising people's taxes but if you look at all of our southern neighbors and some that aren't even our neighbors, but these are the southeastern United States. On a per capita basis, Georgia is much lower than every other state but Florida. Florida is spending Florida rather, the per capita number is skewed because a lot of people claim residence in Florida and don't live there. They also generally skew to a certain part where they don't have to spend the money on K-12 education that we do. It's a different state, very hard to compare Florida to Georgia. But if you look at our closest other neighbors that are in any way similar to us, I'd again like to point out North Carolina, the state that is most similar to us. They spend $10 billion a year combined budget, this is federal and state dollars, than we do. That is 20% more than what we are spending. That's a pretty big gap when people keep telling us we're taxed enough already. So while I'm not necessarily advocating that we go out and try to raise our taxes to meet those others, we have it as a generally accepted fact that we must be cutting taxes all the time or we're not doing our job. What this slide should tell us, if nothing else, is that Georgia is already a fairly lean run state, and there is definitely a lot more room to move up than there is to cut. So we take that and we look forward to, we passed some money for transportation, we're looking at what's up for this session. That's what y'all really care about rather than getting a history lesson. Well, we have that same budget issue every year of those numbers are going to go up year over year. But October revenues, it was a weird month. We don't know if it was a 1 month aberration, but October revenues were actually somewhat flat. Last year, we took the fourth penny, which is $180 million that had been going out of transportation money to the general fund, and it's going to be absorbed in this year's supplemental budget. But if you will, that's kind of money we have to take out of that revenue growth this year. So it presents a budget challenge more this year than it did last year. Dish payments, that was several $100 million paid from the federal government to our rural and urban hospitals to subsidize care under the Affordable Care Act. That money went away. So that is money that has either got to come out of what we're paying in Medicaid, or we're going to be even paying our providers even less as a percentage of their cost. We had a huge issue with our AAA bond rating getting renewed last year. We're one of the states that has maintained a AAA bond rating throughout the Great Recession. Tennessee and South Carolina, two of our neighbors that were on that chart that are already spending more than us, they don't have that, by the way. So we still have a AAA bond rating. It is, I know, very important to the governor as well as the others that are here in this room. And so we heard from the bond rating agencies that we're already kind of walking that line with the things we promised to spend versus the tax capacity, and our, frankly, capping of the income tax was a huge concern to one of those agencies. We weren't planning on raising the tax, but by taking away that ability, that alone has made the AAA bond rating question in order. And then we also have the problem that most state employees have not had a single 1% pay raise since 2008. The job market has improved a lot. Unemployment is down to 5%. If any of your employees in any of your organizations, or frankly anyone sitting in this room, had had a 1% pay raise since 2008 and a 5% unemployment economy, you would all be looking for another job. And that is exactly what's happening to the talent in our state pool. That's going to be a problem that has to be addressed. So basically to say that, we don't have a huge pot of money to throw at all these problems that we talked about. The money is pretty much already accounted for in that. Then let's go to the political environment. We are a nonpartisan group, and we're going to stick to that. But we have to understand that the politics in this country and in this state are changing. It used to be that, frankly, when the folks that make up the groups that are represented in this room got together and made a decision, it was generally blessed at the Capitol. It was taken as this is the way we're going to do things. It was rubber stamped, and everyone applauded. It was jobs. It was good. It was whatever. We now have a very large and growing part of the political base from both parties, as you see with the presidential primary, that have tuned out of the system, and one part of the system is now the problem. We frankly have to sell better of what we're doing to the voter for them to buy in. And the way we're going to do that is with facts. Because if you noticed, all of what the issues and the sound bites that I was trying to counter with that, they're based on emotion. And we've characterized the summer of the primaries, both Democrat and Republican, as the summer of fear. And honestly, after looking at it and seeing the reaction of people that are going to rallies for both, frankly, Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump and some of the others, I no longer think that this is anger. I think it's fear. We have a middle class in this country that feels that the folks that are supposed to be taking care of them at the political level and at the corporate level aren't. And they don't know where to go. We have a skills gap. We don't know that when the middle class folks that have worked their entire life have very little savings to go in, see their health care costs going up, have very little save for retirement, and they're putting their kids about to go into the same system, both in school, college, and into the early stages of the workforce, they actually think things are going to be better. The reaction that we're seeing out of politics right now is fear. We have to address that head on. We've got to come out with solid plans that aren't sound bites, that aren't bumper stickers from both our corporate and political community to communicate a message to our citizens today that this isn't a time for fear. This is a time to understand that we've all got to work a little bit. We've got to understand the problems beyond the sound bites, and we've got to get together and we've got to fix some things. So with that, let's take a very brief overview of what we're going to be doing in this session. Again, business. Kind of goes back to the general environment before we get to those three big ticket subcategories. There are various proposals working through to look at tax reform and/or tax cuts this year. Most of the proposals I've seen that we've looked at are revenue neutral. So it doesn't really affect the budget, it just reallocates how we're going to do those taxes. The problem with revenue neutral is that for every winner, that someone that's expecting a tax cut, you're going to have someone that's going to pay more. And ultimately, we've got to figure out, number one, does reallocating what we pay in tax in one area and making it up for another really make us more competitive, or are we just really kind of playing a shell game, and how do voters react to that? There's actually, while it sounds good on the surface, especially to Republican primary voters right now, when you get to the details of programs of raising sales taxes and putting sales taxes back on groceries, you're hitting not only middle to lower income, those people that are afraid already and they're lashing out, they see their taxes going up. In addition, we have senior citizens that have their income tax exempted in this state that all of a sudden realize their taxes are going to be going up, and they vote a lot more. So politically, from a policy standpoint, we can do this actually fairly easily. From a political standpoint, it's a much heavier lift than I think even a lot of people at the Capitol realize. And frankly, given the relatively short nature of this session, I would just say I handicap it as that's an uphill battle. We do have a film tax credit. That's one of the things that comes up for discussion, and I highlight it here because this is how PolicyBEST tends to look at these things. I don't believe in the concept of government should not pick winners and losers. Every time the government puts in a regulation, passes a tax of any kind, it's picked a winner and loser. The principle is that we should not pick an individual winner or an individual loser. You want taxes to be broad-based with the least distortion as possible, unless you're purposefully planning for a distortion so that you can have an effect. What we've done with the film tax credit is we have literally stolen the film industries from the states of North Carolina, Louisiana, somewhat Maryland, and we are at the point where the LA Times is running a story about the Georgia film industry almost weekly, because we are a low tax state and we are bringing the industry, and it's bringing infrastructure. There was an article this week, there's a film academy that is on the outskirts of Pinewood Studios, 3 miles from where I grew up, down in Fayette County, Georgia. Tyler Perry is going to be doing Fort Mac. There are literally, I think, a dozen other studio projects in the works. The infrastructure is coming, there's going to need jobs. We've created an industry that was not here out of policy. We should not apologize for that. It's actually a good policy, and it is bringing a higher wage jobs. People will say some of them are not permanent, but by having the studios here, the film projects may not be permanent, but the studios and the ancillary companies that support them will be. And so that's the kind of policy that we will look at, is what's best for the state. If we spend $1, do we get more than $1 back? And thus far, I would say with the film tax credit, we still are. Let's get in the weeds on education. We've done a lot of our education over the last 10 years. Everything from changing out our, adding for the first time ever performance standards, and in conjunction with that, adding a much more rigorous curriculum. We've had to do a constitutional amendment for state-sponsored charter schools. Last year we worked very closely. We just had the governor join us, and I was very honored to be able to attend with him and a delegation to New Orleans and look at what New Schools New Orleans had done in starting from scratch with a new school system. And we visited a place called Sci Academy. We spend a 1% sales tax in almost every county in this state on buildings. The governor and I and a group of legislators and others went to a place called Sci Academy that takes a population that is more than 80% minority, more than 80% poor, and a student population coming in at 9th grade between a 6th and 7th grade level. They've been in, I believe, their 6th year of operation, so they've had 3 graduating classes. The graduating class last year that we met, more than 90% accepted to college. I believe it was about 70% on scholarship coming to college, everyone graduating beyond grade level. And I tell you that story and mention about what we're spending on buildings, the entire campus at Sci Academy was a system of trailers connected by backyard decking. We are spending money. We have high schools in this state that are costing us more than $100 million each. And in the poorest section of New Orleans, you're getting those results from a group of trailers. We've got to figure out how to get a return on our investment dollar for our education dollar. And things that we're doing, Opportunity School District to bring in accountability in addition to looking at some flexibility as a way to do it. Then we're getting on to things like workforce development, bringing our joint enrollment from our high schools into colleges and to our technical system, having an advance when ready type setup. These are the things we're doing to not basically send kids through steps that are based on time. It's based on ability. And the whole concept there is to have kids, when they're going through the system, be ready for the next step. A high school student should be ready to go to work, should be prepared with some technical skills if they're going to the college and career academies, or be fully prepared to go into a university in this state. That we must get the resources out of each level so that it leverages the resources we spend on the next. Those are the things that we'll be looking at. And now that we've done all that, we're ready to reform how we allocate the dollars to the counties, and that will be one of the heavy lifts, again, under a commission appointed by the governor. And Chairman England, I know, served on this commission and spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we redivide the pie. And if it all goes according to plan over the next 2 years when this is implemented, we will have been able to incrementally grow where there will no longer be anything called an austerity cut, but there will be a new formula in place so that we are dividing the pie based on the students' needs, not by the needs of the bureaucracy that the state is feeding, and freeing up the local school systems to have much more autonomy on how that money is spent based on the needs of the students that they're serving. On the K-12 system, we have an opportunity that Georgians are going to be asked to consider first through the legislature, and that is through gaming. We take the position we already have gaming in this state. We have a lottery system that with the scratch-off systems, frankly, that we've moved that system to where we're already doing the games based on a win percentage, and anyone can play at their corner store. Online gaming is becoming prevalent with both horse racing, and we now have things like DraftKings and FanDuel that you can't watch TV now without seeing a commercial for those. There's lots of opportunities. We've got to decide really what kind of gaming we're going to have, if any, expanding from what we have. And if we decide to enter that conversation, we have an opportunity here because there's new revenue that comes with that. And so it gives us a fresh opportunity to look at what we have in our HOPE scholarship and HOPE grant programs and frankly try to figure out, are we prioritizing that money as we should? Are we subsidizing college in general, or should we do like we're doing with the governor's HOPE grants for certain trade programs that are needed with career shortages, and start looking at that at the university level? Should we be paying more for STEM graduates and other skills that our employers that are here in Georgia tell us they need, and look at that as a priority? I look at this as an opportunity. It's not a settled thing, but it's a discussion we need to have. We should not do HOPE the way it is just because it's always been done that way. This entire thing is an opportunity from a policy standpoint to see if we're getting the best return on investment for our HOPE dollar. Science, technology, and medicine, again, we talked about a little bit earlier. We're not currently funding our Medicaid program. There is a movement afoot to try to bring in a certificate of need repeal and to open up the free market to healthcare. We have a committee in our legislature on both sides called the Regulated Industries Committee, and that's because not every business operates in a free market. We also have healthcare committees because healthcare in our country and in our state is so regulated that it needs its own government committee. We cannot pretend that the healthcare market is a free market, nor do we have the ability to solve all of those market restrictions here at the state level. As one of my friends in the healthcare industry told me when I was asking about some of the problems, can we fix this at the state level? Can we really do it? He goes, we can't fix the regulated market at the state level, but we sure can lose it and destroy it at the state level if we don't do it right. As I said earlier, we currently right now use the Certificate of Need hospitals as the backstop for healthcare, and especially when you get out into rural care, the hospitals anchor the ability for doctors to have private practices. If we continue to take the profitable parts away from those hospitals and privatize that part of the market and ask the hospitals and doctors to subsidize the part that they lose money on in rural healthcare, on Medicare patients, they get 92% of cost. On Medicaid patients, it's 84% of cost and potentially going down drastically, and uninsured at 0. We cannot ask providers to take those losses and then tell them they're operating in a free market. We cannot have that both ways. So we're going to have to take the same approach to Medicaid. You go back to that first chart we had on the budget, we're spending significantly below others, and figure out a solution. That's something that's going to really take a lot of effort, and it's probably not going to be done this session. This is a multi-year effort to really first educate the public, go back to the angry hat. If you mention the word Medicaid right now, you don't even have to say the E word after the expansion. There is a large part of this population that believes that's all you're talking about. What PolicyBEST is going to be working on right now is much like we did on transportation. Everyone wanted to talk about new projects. What we did last year is we fixed the system that we have. We provided money for maintenance to repair the bridges and repair the roads. I truly believe that for the public to understand the gravity of this situation, we have to separate the expansion from understanding how broken the current system is so we can find a solution for it. That is the way I see the path forward, and I look forward to working with many people in this room. Everyone in this room is a stakeholder in that, whether that's your industry or not, and is one of the most pressing issues facing the state. Transportation I've talked about a lot, so I'm going to hit this very highlighted going forward, and then the speaker will have some extended remarks on it later. But we've handled that, the maintenance issue, and we have a little bit of money for new projects. What we need right now is to concentrate on a couple of critical needs, and in my version they are the freight plan. We have a lot of great transportation assets, from Hartsfield Airport to the ports and our extensive road network. The amount of freight that will be coming through the Port of Savannah is going to double in the next 10 to 15 years. If you've been on I-16, which is 2 lanes, usually most of it, between Macon and Savannah goes down to 1 and randomly for whatever, I'm told by Commissioner McMurray that's almost done. 2 lanes for the amount of trucks that are coming up and down 16 aren't there. So we're either going to have to widen 16, which is a possibility, or we can start looking at some alternate ways. We have folks from the railroads here. We've got to figure out a new way for the state to partner with the railroads, because it is cheaper to build and to get efficiencies out of the current rail network than it is to put new lane miles of concrete. We also have pipelines, and those are some of the most controversial projects being proposed right now. But again, every time you can put a barrel of oil or gasoline through that pipeline as a tanker truck that's not on the road. We've got to look at the freight plan holistically, and it's not all roads. North Atlanta, one of the biggest vision gaps we have right now is figuring out how to move people east-west. Brave Stadium is going to highlight that. Whether you like the stadium or not, it's coming, it's reality. It's going to demonstrate once again that moving people from Cobb to Gwinnett and Gwinnett to Cobb and the outer exurbs will move east-west. We're working on some of the arterial state highways on that right now, but frankly, we need a good look, and that's going to require a regional solution and some regional taxation. But some of the proposals right now are still, if for instance Fulton County goes through a plan and legislature approves to do a 1-county T-SPLOST, Fulton County is a very north-south county, and those solutions are going to be north-south. And if Fulton County goes to its own region and the rest of Atlanta decides not to buy in, you've just taken up a huge part of the potential tax base to get more north-south solutions and then more east-west solutions. And then finally, transit. It's finally okay to say the T word in public, even in Republican circles. We've got to figure out the transit problem. Because if we don't figure out this from a regional standpoint, we will continue to have the suburbs and exurbs build more roads, and we have the city of Atlanta taking lanes out to build bike lanes. We have to have a comprehensive regional approach. The state is going to have to step in at some level to lead. The folks within the region will have to figure it out. But things like MARTA, Greta, CERTA, I have a couple of representatives here, and appreciate you being here. I don't envy the task, because the politics is tough, but the problem is real, and it's time for us to move on to the vision to figure out how to get 5 million Metro Atlantans to figure out that we do live in one region, and a state of 10 million to understand that we have to have that solution.